Hi there, today you're joining me in one of my favorite views in my garden. This is the south facing side of our house and I have some dahlias that overwintered here on accident. They're looking so nice already this year. Normally in our area we wouldn't have dahlia blooms this early unless we were using a hothouse or something like that, but like I said, these dahlias overwintered for me. Normally they say online that they are cold hardy to zones 8 through 11, but because these are nice and toasty up against the foundation of my house, these dahlias were able to overwinter for me in zone 7, and they're really looking nice. It makes me so happy to see them blooming already in the middle of June here. Dahlias are one of my favorite cut flowers, and they are a little bit more of an investment, but I hope that this video is an encouragement to you that it's not too difficult to grow them, and I think that they're totally worth the investment to grow these beautiful blooms that are highly sought after, that command a high price per stem, and then also are just so lovely and especially unique. You can grow dahlias from 3 different ways. The first and most common probably is to buy a bare root tuber, and these dahlia tubers that are sold online are anywhere from $8 to $15 generally, unless you're getting some sort of wholesale bundle as a flower farmer, as a business. You can buy them at your big box store. Sometimes they even have them at Walmart in the garden center, and when you buy a bare root tuber of a dahlia, you know that you're getting the original rootstock from the mother plant. Sometimes dahlias from seed come back as something different, so a bare root is the way to go if you like a specific variety. There are some varieties that are especially sought after for wedding work and things like that, and if you get a bare root tuber, you know that you're getting that variety that you're looking for, and especially those lovely dinner plate dahlias that don't really have a pollen center that shows. Those ones are a little bit difficult to propagate from seed because they have such little pollen, so those are propagated by the tubers. At the end of the season, when the foliage and the blooms die back from the dahlia after the frost, these tubers are dug up and divided. If you're growing dahlias from tubers for the first year, after the end of the season, when you dig up your tuber, you'll notice that probably you have more tuber clumps that are attached that are viable for growing. As long as they have an eye or a growth point, a neck, and then a base, these tubers can be divided and used next year. So whereas you might buy a pack of 2, you might end up with 5 or 6 after just 1 year. It's important to note that if you are in a zone 7 or below, it is recommended that you dig your tubers and store them somewhere that is above freezing, in like a root cellar, or I just store my dahlias in my garage. There's videos online that you can find that help you to know how to store your tubers, but it's not recommended to leave them in the ground. That said, these dahlias behind me overwintered beautifully, and I think it's because we had a mild winter here in my zone 7, and also because they're up against the foundation of my house where it's nice and warm. So I am going to take the risk and attempt to overwinter these dahlias again outside, but what I'm going to do at the end of the season is to dig each of these gently and remove a tuber that I can store and save just in case, and then put the rest of the clump back in the ground to overwinter that way. Some of us, including me, who are in really wet climates, especially if you have wet springs and winters, it's recommended that you dig tubers even if you are warm enough for them to overwinter for you, just because they don't like too much moisture and then they can rot. In addition to growing dahlias from tubers, you could also take cuttings from those same plants that you have coming up that first year or in years to come. So once your dahlia has grown a little bit and it has a first couple sets of leaves, you can trim out the top and dip that in rooting hormone and go ahead and put that under grow lights. What I did is, because it was nice and warm in my house, because we're heading into summer, it's in the 70s, low 70s in my house generally, I didn't use a heat mat, but it is recommended you can use a heat mat. I used grow lights. I put my dahlias in their rooting hormone, and then I went ahead and put them under the lights, and I went ahead and also covered them up with a Tupperware that was large enough to be almost like a humidity dome. It has been a couple of weeks, and of the 6 cuttings that I took, 4 of them have completely rooted and the other 2 are well on their way. It might be free for you to get rootings from cuttings from friends or family, or if you have a dahlia that you just want to propagate, you can make as many cuttings as you would like to. Keep in mind, if you continually cut your plant, you won't have blooms as soon, but what I did when I first had some coming up was I went ahead, especially these ones behind me that were so far ahead from being in the winter and coming up on their own, I went ahead and just took cuttings from those as they were sprouting. The last way to grow dahlias, and something I'm super excited about this year, is growing dahlias from seed. There are multiple different companies that have seed dahlias, and what you need to know is that there is not one parent plant that you're receiving these seeds from. So even if you think you got seeds from a specific plant, the daughter plants will not come back true. So what that means is they may have characteristics of the mother plant, may have characteristics of plants around that plant, but you just don't know what you're going to get. And for me as a flower farmer and grower, I'm just so excited about that. If you have a seed plant dahlia that you've grown from seed that comes up and is just spectacular, you are able to go ahead and propagate those from cuttings or from tubers, and you can name that baby plant, and it is a special variety that is special just to you. So your seedlings will come up different than everybody else's, which is something that is so cool to me. One thing to keep in mind is that in order to have seeds, you have to have pollen. So these seed dahlias are ones that have more of a pollen center that shows. Often dahlias that we see that are really popular for wedding work specifically are those dinner plate dahlias. You can't see the pollen center of those dahlias. So it's important to note that when you're working with seeds, these are dahlias that almost look more like a sunflower where there's the pollen in the middle, or a zinnia or something like that. Of course they're still dahlias, but they have that large pollen center and then the petals coming out from there. So some of these have more pollen, some have less pollen. Some of the pollen centers are easier to see and some are more difficult to see, but it's so exciting to see your dahlia seedlings coming up. They grow just like any other seedling. I put mine on a heat mat and on a seed tray, and they germinated really quickly. They germinated around the same time as my zinnias, and they are looking so nice. So one thing I'm excited about is when you grow dahlias from cuttings, from tubers, or from seeds, it's expected that they'll grow at the same rate. So it's not necessarily getting ahead if you buy just from the tuber. You could get seeds or you could do cuttings and still be on the same page. So some plants, for example, like perennials and things, it really pays to get a larger rootstock or to get a larger tuber or bulb or something like that. But with dahlias, it kind of evens the playing field, because if you have a seed or you have a cutting or you have a tuber, they all grow at the same rate, and you'll have dahlias at the same time, no matter which way you start your dahlias. This is something that I think is really helpful and kind of foolproof, that if you started dahlias, if you put them out too soon and they died back from the frost or something like that, you could always start some from seed. It's important to note that you need to do testing on your own seed varieties that come up to see how they do in the vase and things like that. My plan is for the 18 different seedlings that I started from seed, that I'm going to let them grow and bloom and see what I like, what lasts well in the vase, what I like the look of, and then I'll take cuttings from those, but also tubers. So I'll save the tuber, maybe I'll divide the tuber so that I can save it in a couple different spots and propagate that on next year. Dahlias are prized for their size and their looks, but not so much their vase life. You can depend on a dahlia giving you about 5 days of vase life in an arrangement, and it's important to cut at about 3/4 of the way open. What I like to do when I'm making an arrangement for a client or a friend is go ahead and have one dahlia that's fully open so they can see it in all of its glory, and then have the rest a little bit further behind so that they'll open in the vase and go ahead and give better vase life that way. If you're cutting dahlias for an event or a wedding or something like that, you can cut them when they're a little bit more open, because they don't have to last for the whole week, right? They can last just a couple days. It's also important to note that dahlias are really thirsty flowers, so it's important to make sure that they're well hydrated once they're cut. I like to cut mine in early morning or late afternoon, just as the sun is going down, so there's no hot sun on their leaves, and you can always put them straight into a holding solution, or you can dip them in almost boiling water if you find that they're wilting. That will help to hydrate them. Now, I've seen it said that dahlias don't open in the vase at all if you harvest them too soon. Some people recommend to harvest them mostly completely open, and they say that if they're just cracking open that they won't open at all in the vase, and that is just not true in my experience. It may depend on the variety of dahlia, but what I like to do when there's multiple blooms on one stem is I like to make sure my focal bloom is either 3/4 of the way open or all the way open, like I said, for my client to see. And then if there's other secondary or tertiary blooms that are on that stem, I go ahead and include them in the arrangement, because in my experience, if they've just started to crack open, they will open in the vase. It'll take a little longer, but then that means my client will have that one big bloom at first, give it about 5 days, and as that one's petering out, the other blooms are ready to come into show. Now, I wouldn't recommend that as a first-year dahlia grower that you grow hundreds of tubers, but I do think it's worth a little bit of an investment. Dahlia seeds that I am growing this year are the Bee's Friend or Bee's Choice from Floret, and I think they were about $12 a seed pack. But like I said, I have already started 18 seedlings from those, and I have some seeds left over. So if you think about it, it's less than $1 a tuber. And of course, I may like some, I may not like others, but if I find one that's really spectacular, I think that's totally worth it. Another thing that I think is worth the investment is getting some tubers that are specialty that you really like. What I did my first year growing dahlias is I got a bundle mix. I believe I got them from Brex Bulbs. I got the hot mix. I think I'll put it on the screen for you. So it was 5 tubers that were around $9 or $10 a piece after tax and shipping and everything. And I think that that was worth $50 to try 5 different tubers was worth it for me for my first year, because like I said, you could propagate them from cuttings, so you could easily have more than 5 plants off of the one tuber, right? And after 1 year, when you dig up your tubers, you can divide them and have even more plants that way. So some people think that dahlias are just like a 1-year flower, but I would recommend that you dig them up so that you can save your tubers and have them year after year and grow your supply. Most flower stems at the wholesale level sell for around $1. Some are 75 cents, some are a little bit more, some are around $1. Most of them, I think, are around that dollar range, when dahlias for a bunch of 10 can bring anywhere from like $15 to $20 at the wholesale, just at standard. So it's important to note that with these dahlias, yes, it is a little bit of an investment to get the tubers or to start the seeds, but you can have those specialty varieties, especially those large dinner plate dahlias will bring more at a florist or something like that. So you're looking more at like $2 a stem wholesale, and even more when you put in your arrangement, right? Those pom-pom dahlias and the smaller varieties won't bring as much money because they're not as big, but as far as a focal flower goes, I think that dahlias are worth a try, and I hope this encourages you. Whether you get them from tuber, from cuttings, or you start them from seeds, I think dahlias are a worthy venture. Don't forget to provide some sort of staking or support for your dahlias. You'll see that I'm using obelisks behind me. You could use tomato cages. You could use just those stick in the ground posts, T-posts, or anything that you can lash your dahlias to. If you have them next to a fence, you could use twine or something to attach them to the fence. The goal is that they don't snap off in the wind. So if you put them in a protected location and then also provide them a little bit of support, they'll do best. You'll have long, strong stems, and hopefully they will be a joy in your garden, just as they are in mine. Let me know if you're growing dahlias this year and if it's something that you're excited about, and let me know if you have a specific variety that you love. And thanks so much for joining me today.